Oh, Kelly, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Awesome.
Can you hear me?
I can.
And how about seeing me?
Yep, I can see you.
All right. We did our audio and visual check, and I think we're going to get started here in just a moment. It's just 1 minute after, so I'll just get just another few seconds here if some folks want to take the poll. I mentioned in the chat that we do have the video and mute on for participants, but the chat is open, so please feel free to participate if you'd like to share your social information in there, of course, or put any questions while we're going through the presentation. You're welcome to do so. And we'll get started here in just 1 moment. All right, everyone, we're going to close that poll. And we're going to get started. We're going to be as timely as we can because we have a lot of information we want to share in the next 30 minutes with you. But first, I want to thank you for taking the time to attend our Secret to Developing New People Managers. My name is Kelly Palanti. My company is Mentally Fit Workplaces, and I'm here with my consulting business partner, David Bradshaw from North Star PMO. And we're here to talk about basically what you can do inside your organization to build up new leaders. So those leaders that have come into a role because they have those strong technical skills, but they may lack some of the people management skills. So this is really starting your managers off on the right foot. So I just want to tell you so briefly about myself. Again, my name is Kelly Palanti. I've been in consulting management and HR for about 20 years now. My specialty is leadership coaching and development. I both do it one-on-one and also in group activities as well. So I've had this opportunity to work with David. He's out of Boston, and this is really an interesting take that we're spinning on learning and development that's directed just at new leaders. So just as they're coming on with your organization and growing. So I'm going to turn it over to David and let him tell you just a little bit about himself, and we'll get started.
Thank you, Kelly. Can you still hear me loud and clear?
Yes.
Awesome. So thank you, everyone, for joining. My name's David Bradshaw. I'm the CEO of North Star PMO. We are a boutique HR and people ops company helping small, medium-sized businesses grow. And as Kelly mentioned, what we'd like to share with you today is some information that we've gathered as we've worked together. And just a little bit of background about myself before I do that. So I'm a career management consultant. I've worked with some of the big names out there, and I've grown organizations up from nothing. And in that mission, one of the most difficult things I found when scaling a team is getting that level of people who want to step up to management, getting them well prepared for that role. And I've also seen what happens if you don't do that. It can lead to a lot of problems. So what we put together, Kelly and I, because we saw a big gap in the market here, is a training course to address how do you prepare those people who are showing promise in your organization. How do you prepare them to take that first people management role safely, effectively, and in a way that everybody wins? So we saw a gap. We put together a training course, and we're really excited to share with you today some of the kind of key learnings that we got from that exercise. So without further ado, Kelly, if you want to advance the slides. So let's start with what is the role of the manager? Because I think one of the key areas of confusion when you're first thrust into that line management role is, well, what am I supposed to do? What am I going to achieve here? How am I going to be measured? And it can be a little bit confusing to people. So if you want to go to the next slide, Kelly, we start by taking a look at what the management outcomes need to be. And at the highest level, the role of the manager is to work to increase the efficiency and the effectiveness of not just their employees, but processes, projects, and organizations as a whole. What do we mean by efficiency and effectiveness? Next click, Kelly. Well, efficiency is achieving the desired outcomes with the least use of resources. And usually that means human resources, but not always the case. And effectiveness is about the ability of the team to achieve those desired outcomes at or below a tolerable level of risk. So one is, how much is it going to cost us in resource terms to get the job done? The second is, are we equipped to get the job done? Are we taking on too much? Is it too risky? And are we going to be effective in achieving those outcomes? So the new managers say, okay, we understand at the high level what we're supposed to be doing here, but what kind of tools do I have at my disposal? Next slide, Kelly. And I point people here to what I call the 4 key functions of management, and you can reveal them all in one go, Kelly. Let's take a look at them. So planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. And because we're not delivering the full training course today, I'm not going to talk to you about all 4. We're just going to focus in on leading and controlling. And what I'm going to share with you today is, for both leading and controlling, what are the 2 big problems that I see new managers face quite commonly, and what can we do to prevent them and support our new managers through those problems? So let's kick off with leading. First of all, what is leading? Well, I think we all understand what it means to be a leader. It's about communication, it's about motivation, it's about setting the right tone, it's about helping others achieve their directives, and it's actually setting a direction for the team as a whole. Next slide, please, Kelly. So what is the kind of new manager trap, as I like to call it, that people often fall into when it comes to leading? Well, I see it time and time again. It's micromanagement. If you think about how new managers get put into their position, they're often very competent at the hard skill of the function of the team, right? So if you're a software engineer, for example, and you're doing a great job writing software, you become known for being really competent. You could get promoted to being a team leader just on the strength of your technical abilities. Okay, and what does that mean? Well, the risk is, somebody who's built up this reputation for being competent with the hard skills and is probably very confident in what they do. They've probably developed their own preferred way of doing things over time. And it's very tempting for a new manager in this situation to be keen to share that experience and to get other people to do it what they call their way. And this can backfire because it can reduce the whole leadership task to basically dictating others how to do their job, micromanagement. Okay, this can lead to very bad outcomes in the team, as you might imagine, interpersonal conflict, even attrition. So how do we coach people to avoid this problem? Next slide, please, Kelly. So one of the lessons I like to teach new managers early is this concept of situational leadership. And what we mean by situational leadership is a leader has to adapt their style to the situation that's in front of them. And I think most people understand that when it comes to working with individuals one-to-one, you have to adapt your leadership style. But it doesn't stop there. It actually depends not just on the individual that you're dealing with, but also the task that you're dealing with them on. And this is where situational leadership comes in. It teaches you how to vary your style as a leader based on the level of competence and the level of commitment that your team member has for the task at hand. And it doesn't even stop there. It actually changes over time, as the diagram on the screen shows you. As the individual that you're leading becomes more experienced, more competent, more confident in the task that they're doing, then you have to adapt your leadership style to suit along that journey as well. So we like to tell our new managers, you have to be aware of this model. You have to be aware that you have to adapt, not just in terms of how much support you give, how directive you are, but also to keep an eye on how that changes over time as the individual that you are supporting gets more experienced in the task that they're performing.
And I'll just add there, I think what's important is that he's almost giving them, this gives them the permission to adapt, because I think a lot of times, a person like you mentioned, they have the particular style and they get almost frustrated when that style, doesn't work. And this kind of just shows you that there is a flexibility, when you're managing people, not only in your own style and like you mentioned, the tasks, but also as the person, as an individual. So you're really treating somebody as an individual person, not just as a blanket, procedure that you do for everyone. So this, I think, also really fosters a culture of belonging as well.
I think that's a very good point. Very well made, Kelly. Thank you. And of course, the whole idea of this model, if you look at the S4 square, the green one there, we're trying to get people to that point of effective delegation, where the individual concerned is confident, motivated, engaged, and able to act fairly autonomously. And that's really where you're hoping to get people to. Okay, next slide, please, Kelly. So the fourth key function of management, again, we're only going to look at two today, is controlling. And I just want to spend a minute first explaining what this is, because we've just spoken about micromanagement and now we're putting up a slide called controlling. So this is not about controlling the individual. This is about controlling the outcomes of your team. So I like to use the airplane analogy here. And let's compare this to a highly functioning member of your team, right? A pilot of an airplane doesn't actually do very much flying these days. The pilot of the airplane sits there and watches and lets the plane do its job. Most modern planes are more capable of flying themselves than the pilot is under ordinary circumstances. So that's the kind of tone I want to set here. This is a monitoring and intervention function. It is not a micromanagement function. I hope that distinction is clear. And what you're looking to do here as a manager is keep your eye on things and help facilitate change where that change is necessary. Yes. Kelly, you look like you were about to say something.
I just agreed. I'm just like, yes, it's more, and that's really kind of the opposite of controlling, really, of micromanaging, right? It's more of that assist, and really, and I think that managers, when they learn this skill, and if they can learn it early on, it really takes a lot of, number one, just pressure off of them, and then the time too, because the time that you invest and really putting into a person, it can pay off on the other side if you give them that autonomy. So yes, I just totally agree.
Thank you. So now we've set the tone. Next slide, please. What is the common problem we see here? Okay, we can go to the next slide. So the new manager trap that I find very common here and is actually extremely destructive if not dealt with effectively is overstepping. And what I mean by overstepping is going beyond one's delegated authority. So if you imagine the situation, a new manager has been monitoring, something has not gone right, and they've decided to intervene. And the way that they intervene might not be the most effective way, and it might overstep. And as an extreme example, and I've seen this happen in organizations for real, a new manager rocks up at the door, HR's door, knocks on the door and says, oh, by the way, I've just fired so-and-so because they didn't do a thing in the way that I wanted them to do it. Wow. Obviously, that cannot happen and should not happen, but it does, unfortunately. And it's really a result of one of many things, actually. It could be overconfidence, new manager in their role, feeling that they're now in charge. It could just be naivety, they don't realize that they can't do things like this without there being some consequences. Or, and this is perhaps the most common, the organization hasn't set that new manager up well for success because they haven't properly defined processes and lines of authority and things like that. And that's extremely common. Obviously, the outcomes of this can be absolutely terrible. In the extreme example I gave there, there's a significant legal liability, but more often than not, in less extreme cases, it leads to tension and friction between the manager's team and the support functions within the organization, typically HR, but it could be any of them. Next slide, please. So how do we avoid overstepping? Well, if we think back to what we just said about what are the common causes, by far the most common cause is the confusion. Where do the boundaries lie? What am I allowed to do? What am I not allowed to do? It's often not written down in organizations, especially smaller ones, and it's certainly not communicated well. So I encourage our new managers and our managers of new managers to work together to set those boundaries and to make sure that they decide together who's going to be involved in what, and what represents overstepping, what is within the authority of the new manager. And one of the most effective tools I've ever seen to help do this is something called a RACI chart. I'm assuming that most people are familiar with what it is, but it's basically a two-dimensional table that sets out who's going to be responsible, accountable, consulted, or informed when a certain action is necessary. And I think this is incredibly helpful because you can build these as cross-functional teams. It can help build relationships between those functional teams, but it also sets out the rules of engagement, right? I can pull this out and say, okay, I have a disciplinary action I need to take here. Who do I need to get involved in this from across my organization? And it really helps level set that new manager and say, okay, I am playing to a set of rules here and I need to involve other people at the right time. Okay, so I think one of the key aspects for this to work well is really those cross-functional relationships between teams. It's okay having a set of rules, but you have to follow them. But you also have to build trust between those people, because there'll be occasions where you'll want to step a little bit outside the box because you need to in certain situations. So building that level of trust and harmony across those functions is really key. And I think that's a nice point to stop and to hand over to Kelly, who's going to talk to us a little bit about conflict resolution.
Yes. And I just want to, say one thing about the RACI card. I think, a lot of things when we talk about, feeling secure in the role is, having rules and policies in place and having these things just to go to. So when situation A comes up, where do I go? Because I think that's where a lot of people kind of get stuck in the mud, and they really don't even sometimes solve or attempt to resolve situations because they just don't even know what that next step is. So I think that's really important. And that does tie into a lot about what I want to talk about regarding conflict resolution. So this is really kind of where I'm digging down now more into like a specific area that new managers need to really advance skill sets. And a lot of that has to do with, because we take conflict resolution, particularly a new manager, we take our conflict resolution skills from what we learn at home typically, right? Like how do we resolve conflict with family, how to resolve conflict with friends. And we naturally try to use those skills when we're at the workplace. But what we need to understand is that a lot of those don't cross over and apply. And a lot of those skills just need to be advanced. You need to have a different way to come to resolutions. And what I have found through my own training as a leader and then also delivering trainings is that you often see people taking those conflict resolution skills that they learn at work and then doing the opposite, taking them back to family, taking them back to friends, and looking at new ways to really solve problems. So I'm going to talk about that. And then I'm going to talk about something, a word that's really popular out there right now, and that is called psychological safety. So this is I'll talk about the definition of it, but this is essentially an environment where you create, where someone feels what they call mentally safe or psychologically safe. And I'm going to talk about basically how conflict resolution and psych safety go hand in hand. And you really have to have both to have an effective work culture. So let's get into that. First, I have this lovely picture here. Just show you quickly. This is a picture of a leader here in the center. So this is our leader, and we're looking at her from outside perspective, let's say, and she is putting her hands over her ears, right? Because it looks like the people around her are likely upset. They have their hands raised. They're pointing. I see a pencil pointing at someone. And when I first looked at this picture, my actual thought was, is this somebody who's looking at themselves, from the outside? So is she actually in the real moment just sitting there and looking forward and thinking to herself, I would love just to put my hands over my ears and get out of this situation? So I've seen this a lot when this happens, when conflict arises to the point of raised voices where people are getting heated. Sometimes a manager will just check out because they don't know what to do. They're maybe intimidated by the situation because there's yelling. They may be having their own traumatic experiences triggered because they're hearing some of the things that are going on around them. So the key is, like, what do we do in a situation like this? Now, to me, this is one of the more extreme conflicts at work. This is a situation where we've got to the point where tensions have risen. But I want to also point out something that's happening in this meeting too. So if you look down at the table there, they've got their notebook out, they've got their pens. It looks like they've got some graphs there. So this is likely a creative meeting, somewhere where ideas are being exchanged. So how do we get past this look like conflict to get back to the innovative side, to get back where we can share ideas in a productive way? First, what we've got to do is diffuse the conflict in a situation like this. We've got to bring the temperature down. And when I think about doing that, I actually think about it from kind of a scientific perspective. So here's our brain right here, and we've got some things circled and marked. And I'm going to talk specifically about that little red dot down there called the amygdala, if I say it correctly. And it's actually a little almond shape. That's actually the Latin word for it. And it's the almond-shaped thing inside your head there. And that is what we call our fight or flight response. So back in the caveman days, when something triggered us and we were scared, that response basically came and took over that purple spot of our brain. It took over our logic and made us respond in a way to protect ourselves, whether that's being loud, whether that's shrinking back, some kind of skill that was to protect ourselves. So this still exists in our bodies today, and it is still triggered. And when it happens, basically, if you've ever had somebody say they've lost it, what they're describing is an hijack. And the hijacking means that little part of your brain has taken over the logic. It's not letting the logic process the situation, and it's going right into fight or flight response. And you will continue in that mode unless you are diffused. And once you are diffused, then the logic part of your brain opens back up again. You're able to look at the situation differently. The key is, how do you get that to that point of diffusion? And that is one thing that a manager needs to understand. There are several ways to do it. I'm going to pull out these 4 up right now. So if we're in this situation where we have conflict that is really high tension, there's a couple things to do. One, stop the situation and spread out. Have people go to different areas, have just a little break, and maybe put some questions out there to make them reason out the situation. Was this person challenging you? Were they challenging your idea? Just have them stop and think about that. Another simple one you hear a lot is count to 10. And just everybody count to 10, take a breath, and just sit in silence and count to 10. There is scientific evidence behind that as well. It actually takes 10 seconds for the amygdala to start to basically simmer down and allow that logical brain to come back. So there is a time, that specific 10-second count is meaningful there. Take deep breaths. What you're doing when you're getting into that fight or flight mode is you're denying oxygen to your brain. So sometimes just saying, okay, everyone, we're going to take a few minutes, just everyone take a deep breath. Or take a walk. Sometimes doing something physical, getting that emotion going, will really diffuse conflict. And really, you've got to figure out kind of how this works for each person. But could you imagine when someone comes on to your organization, if that was a question you asked them? Listen, and when you get into a conflict situation, how do you like to diffuse? Because everyone's different. Some people are going to want to be left alone. Some people are going to want to take a walk. It's good to understand that. That will help them them effectively manage conflict. And then you've got happier people on this side. So how do we do that? How do managers actually go about, after they've diffused, how do they manage that conflict? One is to focus on the issues, not personalities. Again, this is not like managing your friend's conflict. This is managing at work. So we've got to focus on issues and facts of the situation. Really try to take out the personal connections as far as letting that overshadow your bias in the situation. So really refer to the facts of what's going on. You really want to do also active listening. If you don't know what this is an amazing skill that I do an entire course on. It's really kind of reflecting about what someone's saying. Active listening is more than just like looking eye to eye. It's nodding along with someone. It's kind of summarizing what they've said to you. And this really makes someone feel like they're seen and heard in a situation. And what David mentioned with the RACI card, ensure all key perspectives are included. Everyone who needs to be involved in situations when you're resolving conflict, make sure they're there. Make sure all the key players are there, because that, again, will build resentment if all the people involved in the situation are not involved in resolution. And most importantly, I cannot stress enough, is to practice empathy. This is one of the key skills for managers, not only, post-pandemic here as we move into this new work world. This is something that we're going to need moving forward. We need organizations and leaders who are going to treat people as individuals and not sympathize with them and feel sorry for them, but actually try to put themselves in their shoes and find out how they need support from their perspective. So basically, don't treat people how you want to be treated. Treat them how they want to be treated. That's practicing empathy. All right. So psychological safety, we're getting to that. We've heard this word a lot right now. And I will tell you that this term came up originally in the early 90s by Dr. Amy Edmondson. And basically what she defined, it's a belief that somebody will not be humiliated, punished for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes, and that the team is safe for taking interpersonal risk. This is key to an environment that is diverse, inclusive, and wants belonging. So people can bring their authentic selves to work. And by doing that and be able to admit mistakes, you can see how that is really going to come full circle with conflict resolution. So when you're in conflict, you need to be able to be vulnerable and say, sometimes, maybe I made a mistake the way I approached this. Maybe this is a way we could have done this. And vulnerability, you can only do that if the environment is safe. If you feel like being vulnerable, saying you make mistakes you're not going to be retaliated against, or it's not going to be used against you, performance reviews or later on. You need to be able to feel safe to have mistakes. And a lot of that is led by our leaders, right? They need to role model this behavior so everyone in the organization can feel safe. So there really is this really direct circle between conflict management, how to safely and effectively do that, and then also building a psychologically safe environment where people feel okay to have conflict. Because honestly, right, conflict is natural. When humans get together, we're going to have conflict, but what we need is for it to be productive on the other end. We can't have it actually be resentful, pushed to the side. It needs to be addressed so the organization can continue to grow. And knowing that we can learn from mistakes and it's okay to make mistakes is, again, setting that culture of belonging and establishing psychological safety. All right. So thank you so much for joining us today. It is at 12:30, and I really want to be timely with everyone's, time coming in and spending with us. We have some information that we're going to send out. There's some links here too. We will send them to you by email as well. Just some further reading on some of the theories we talked about, some of the things that we go over inside of our training. If you found value in what we talked about today, please reach out to David and I. We'll be sending out all our contact information and a way for you to have a consultation with us if you like. It is our goal to really help managers in 2023 coming up for this new year and building a new way of working and leading at work. So thank you again for joining us. And David, would you like to end?
Yeah, just to say thank you, Kelly, for the opportunity. Thank you, everybody, for turning up. I'm very happy to engage with anyone on this call afterwards. So if you have any comments, questions, or you'd like some help with something after the session, please feel free to reach out to all of us. And thanks again for coming, and I wish you all a great rest of your day.
Thank you all. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.